The snow fell in thick, relentless curtains at December evening, transforming the city into a winter wonderland straight out of a postcard. Streetlights glimmered on the white blanket that covered the roads, and rooftops were dusted with pristine snow. Yet, the beauty was deceptive. The streets were cold, merciless, and unkind. The kind of cold that crept through every layer of clothing, settled into bones, and made every breath visible in frosty clouds. Matthew Harrison walked briskly toward his car after another long night at the office. At 39, his dark brown hair was flecked with gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished, almost somber appearance. He wore a tailored black wool coat over his suit, a subtle but unmistakable statement of his status. As CEO of Harrison Development, a commercial real estate firm his father had founded, he was accustomed to responsibility, long hours, and the weight of running a multi-million-dollar company. His life was organized, structured, and measured in board meetings, contracts, and quarterly reports. His house was just 2 blocks away. A magnificent historic mansion with wrought iron gates and warm, inviting lights glowing from its tall windows. He had bought it 5 years ago after his divorce, needing a fresh start. The house was far too large for one person, but Matthew had never minded. If anything, the excess space made him feel less alone. He could walk from room to room, from floor to floor, without being reminded of the absence of another human being. As he approached the gates, his eyes caught sight of a woman and a little girl huddled against a stone wall just outside his property. The woman had long, disheveled blonde hair, dusted with snow, and wore inadequate clothing for the freezing weather, a thin gray sweater over lighter layers. The little girl, no older than 5 or 6, had blonde hair tied into pigtails and wore a red velvet dress under a coat that was far too thin for conditions. She clutched a worn teddy bear to her chest, her small body shivering violently despite her attempt at bravery. Matthew's first instinct was to keep walking. He reasoned that they would move along eventually, that there were shelters and social services. He couldn't help everyone. But then, the little girl's wide, solemn eyes met his, and in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Sir, we haven't eaten since yesterday." Matthew froze. Her words pierced him. He looked at her pale face, at the way her tiny hands gripped the teddy bear like it was a lifeline. Then he looked at her mother. Sarah Parker's lips were tinged blue, her breathing shallow and labored. This wasn't simply cold. This was a medical emergency. Matthew knelt to meet the child at eye level. "How long have you been out here?" he asked gently. "I don't know," Khloe said softly. "Since it got dark. Mommy got sick, and we had to leave our place because we couldn't pay the rent. We tried shelters, but they were all full. Then she got worse and couldn't walk, so we stopped here, where there was a wall to lean on." Matthew took a careful step closer, his mind racing. He had faced tough negotiations, hostile competitors, and even life-or-death business decisions. But nothing compared to the helplessness and urgency he felt seeing this small child trying to be brave for her mother. "And your names?" he asked. "I'm Khloe Parker, and this is my mommy, Sarah," she replied. Matthew took a deep breath. "Khloe, I live in this house right here. I want to bring you and your mommy inside. It's warm and she needs help. Can you walk, or should I carry you?" "I can walk, but Mommy can't," Khloe whispered. Without hesitation, Matthew pulled out his phone and called 911, requesting an ambulance. Then, he gently lifted Sarah into his arms. She was frighteningly light, her skin icy to the touch. Khloe walked beside him, clutching her teddy bear as though it were her only shield in the world. The moment they crossed the threshold of his mansion, warmth enveloped them. Mrs. Chun, his housekeeper, looked up from the kitchen, shocked, as Matthew entered carrying an unconscious woman with a small child trailing behind. Mrs. Chun, "Get blankets, warm water, not hot, just warm, and call Dr. Morrison. Tell him I have a medical emergency," he instructed. Mrs. Chun, who had worked for Matthew for 3 years and had learned not to question him, immediately sprang into action. Matthew laid Sarah on the sofa, tucking blankets around her shivering body. Khloe hovered nearby, her small eyes wide with fear. "Is Mommy going to die?" she asked in a trembling voice. "No, sweetheart. Help is on the way," Matthew replied firmly. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked gently. "Yesterday morning. We had cereal, but then the milk ran out. We didn't have money for more, Khloe admitted. Matthew felt a pang of guilt and heartbreak. This child had been hungry for over 24 hours and worried about her mother's safety instead of her own. Mrs. Chun prepared warm, gentle soup for Khloe while Matthew stayed close. Within 15 minutes, the ambulance arrived. Paramedics assessed Sarah's condition immediately. Severe hypothermia, pneumonia. They determined she needed hospitalization without delay. Matthew insisted that Khloe stay with him. "She's safe here," he said firmly. The social worker initially hesitated, but Matthew's calm authority, combined with his resources and willingness to take responsibility, convinced her. Carrying the sleeping Khloe back to his mansion, he tucked her into a guest room prepared by Mrs. Chun. For the first time in years, Matthew's house felt alive. He had taken in strangers, homeless, sick, vulnerable, and made a commitment to their well-being. The choice was impulsive, possibly reckless, and completely unlike the meticulous, controlled man he had become. But looking at Khloe's hopeful face and remembering her words, he knew he couldn't have done otherwise. The next morning, Khloe peeked into Matthew's bedroom. "Is Mommy okay?" she asked softly, her voice still heavy with worry. Matthew picked up his phone and called a hospital. "She's stable," he reassured Khloe. "Now let's get some breakfast." In the kitchen, Mrs. Chun had already prepared pancakes. Khloe's eyes lit up, and as she ate, she began sharing their story. Sarah had been a pediatric nurse, working tirelessly to support them both. After developing a severe autoimmune disease, she could no longer manage the long shifts required by her job. Bills piled up, savings ran out, and eventually she lost their apartment. They had been surviving on hope alone. Matthew listened, anger simmering, not at them, but at a system that had failed those who dedicated their lives to helping others. Later that morning at the hospital, Sarah was awake. Khloe ran to her side, careful not to disturb the 4 lines. Seeing her daughter safe brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Matthew explained everything, how he found them in the cold, brought them inside, and called for help. Sarah's expression shifted between disbelief, gratitude, and confusion. "I don't understand why you did all this for strangers," she said. "I needed to," Matthew replied, his voice quiet but steady. "I'd spent years consumed by work, forgetting what it means to help people. Khloe reminded me of what truly matters." As Sarah recovered, Matthew arranged for her to meet specialists who could help manage her condition and find her a suitable role. Eventually, she was hired as a care coordinator at a hospital that accommodated her medical needs, allowing her to continue using her skills without risking her health. Meanwhile, he had converted one of his guest rooms into a comfortable space for Khloe. Mrs. Chin immediately bonded with the child, teaching her to cook, reading bedtime stories, and filling the house with warmth. The mansion, once echoing with emptiness, now held laughter, conversation, and the small chaos of family life. Matthew found himself leaving work earlier, spending evenings with Khloe, helping her with homework, and reading bedtime stories. His sister noticed a change. "You're lighter, happier. It's like having them here woke something up in you." Friendship between Matthew and Sarah deepened into love. They shared coffee in the mornings, dinners, and the quiet satisfaction of domestic life. Matthew taught Khloe to ride a bike in the backyard, while Sarah helped him redecorate rooms that had previously felt cold and formal. Months turned into a year. The mansion was transformed. Christmas morning arrived, and Matthew sat in the living room, watching Khloe unwrap presents with pure joy. Sarah sat beside him, smiling, a sense of peace settling over them all. Without thinking, Matthew reached for Sarah's hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked, curious. "For giving me a family, for reminding me what my house was missing, and showing me what truly matters. Not money or work, but connection, compassion, and the courage to help." Sarah smiled softly. "I think we're the ones who should be thanking you. You saved our lives that night, and every day since. You gave us hope and a future. You gave me purpose," Matthew admitted. "Before meeting you and Khloe, I went through life mechanically, focused on work without knowing why. You reminded me of the reason my father built this company. Not for wealth, but to make a difference." Inspired, Matthew established a foundation dedicated to emergency housing and support for healthcare workers facing crisis. Many nurses and medical professionals, he realized, were one illness away from homelessness. The foundation grew steadily, becoming a tangible way to give back to those who gave so much to others. Life settled into a rhythm. Matthew, Sarah, and Khloe shared dinners, bedtime stories, and laughter. One quiet evening, after putting Khloe to bed, Sarah asked, "Why did you really take us in that night?" Matthew paused, considering his words. "I'd spent 5 years alone, prioritizing work over everything else. But when Khloe looked at me that night and said they hadn't eaten since yesterday, something inside me broke, or perhaps woke up. I had a choice: stay the cold man my ex-wife left, or be someone better. I chose to open my door." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "I was terrified that night, scared we'd freeze outside, that I'd fail Khloe completely." "You didn't fail," Matthew said firmly. "You survived. You protected your daughter under impossible circumstances. That's strength, not failure." Months passed. Sarah regained her health fully, and the bond between her and Matthew grew stronger. Khloe thrived, safe and happy in her new home. Matthew's mansion, once a cold, empty building, became a warm, loving home, filled with the joy and chaos only a family can bring. Finally, on a snowy Christmas morning, Matthew approached Sarah. "I'm in love with you," he confessed, "and I love Khloe like she's my own daughter. I want a life with both of you. Will you marry me?" Sarah's eyes brimmed with tears. "Are you sure? I have complications, medical issues." "I don't care," Matthew replied firmly. "I want family, love, and life with you. You are my choice." Sarah smiled through her tears. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the city, but inside, warmth, hope, and love filled every corner of Matthew's mansion. By opening his door that snowy night, he had discovered the one thing he'd been missing all these years: connection, purpose, and a family to cherish. And in that home, filled with laughter, pancakes, and bedtime stories, Matthew finally understood what it meant to truly live. Not through wealth or business success, but through love, compassion, and the courage to act when it matters most.